Alright guys, today's topic is testing reading. When testing reading, we have a few challenges when assessing, which is difficulty assessing a skill, because it's not as visible as a productive skill, like speaking or writing. And constructing items which elicits appropriate reading behavior is actually challenging. In testing reading, we usually test reading comprehension. And constructing reading comprehension questions is quite challenging. You need skill and experience in this field, but it's not that difficult. That it's not that it is impossible to acquire. We'll practice it this week, and we'll practice designing it in our seminars. So you will not do it in groups; you'll do it individually. So which skills do we assess? Well, there are two types of skills, like fast and more detailed ones. So expeditious or fast reading operations, they're skimming and scanning. And we usually use it for while reading questions. We actually even ask this kind of questions in comprehension parts. In IELTS, for example, we have few questions when asking for numbers. In scanning, those details are usually what? They are like numbers, places, names. It may be dates as well. Specific words and phrases. And skimming is reading for gist. It is also known as reading for gist, which means obtaining the general information of details. And the most popular question might be like, what is the text about? The text is about friendship, for example. The text is about war or whatever. Careful reading operations are these displayed here: identify, interpret, outline, distinguish, and recognize. For example, making inferences. For careful reading operations, one of them is making inferences. Infer the meaning of an unknown word from the. We usually have this kind of questions in FCE, certificate exam. They even put numbers in the text. Every fifth line is numbered, like 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and so on. Why do they do so? So that it is easy to find the line that we need, because we have questions like this. For example, what does commemorate in line 23 mean? So you don't have to sit and count those lines, because you already have those numbers. On the left or right margin, you usually have them. So you find the word, and you use the context, you read the sentence or the passage if it's necessary, and then you try to figure out the meaning. Alternatively, they can ask to find the word in the passage, right? So what does the word commemorate in passage 5 mean, for example? So it's easier to count passages rather than lines. Sometimes they don't give the word, they give the definition, and ask learners to identify the word. So we give the definition. What does the definition? Or they say find the word which has the following definition in passage 5, for example. But they don't tell for the whole text, because students will waste a lot of time just searching for the word in the whole text. So when you use this kind of task, it's very important to specify the line or a passage. It's very important. And we also ask why, who, WH questions. Macro skills. So these are the skills that candidates should be able to do. When we teach reading, we should make sure that our students are able to do the following skills. Scanning text to locate specific information, skimming, to obtain the gist, the general idea, identifying stages of an argument. We can usually teach linking words when practicing this kind of skill. Identifying examples presented in support of an argument. So why, how do you know? For example, we ask this question, how do you know? How can you prove that your answer is correct? So provide us examples, provide us from the context, from the text. Micro skills, identifying references of pronouns. For example, what does it in line 25 mean? Is it an animal? Is it a tree? Is it an opinion or what? Or what does they in line 5 mean? People, objects, opinions. What does it mean? Using references to guess the meaning of unfamiliar words, we've mentioned it, and understanding the relations between parts of the text by recognizing indicators in discourse. Yes, we usually use, we recommend our learners to find the discourse markers, and divide the text into the following parts, like introduction, development, transition, and conclusion. For example, students can find out the conclusion by finding the linking word like to sum up. By doing so, we actually also teach our students not only to read, but also to write, because they're exposed to an example how to write. And we encourage our learners to use those linking words. What kind of text can we use? Well, there are tons of them. Here you can have a look at the list. We usually use our textbooks, ready-made materials, but you can also use magazines and short stories. You can adapt them. You can design your own tests. Some people believe that we cannot use authentic materials with lower level students. But actually, we can if the tasks are designed appropriately and if the texts are selected appropriately. So for lower level students, we can choose something easier, like a menu, restaurant menu, for example, or we can use science. Even in CAT, Key English Test, which is beginner. So it's elementary, I think. Yeah, CAT is elementary and pre-intermediate level test. So they use a lot of science instead of long texts. They use science. For example, beware of the dog. So what does it mean? Or engaged, or don't disturb. So very short texts, science. And we have to understand the meaning of the sign. So some answers are given and students select. So actually we can use this kind of very simple texts with our students and test them. For in activities, for example, I remember when the students had to read the menu and they had to select the food they like. It's a very authentic activity. In real life, we do so with menus in restaurants or in cafes. And we select the food we like to eat. So it's quite easy. Years ago, decades ago, the approach when teaching reading was students had to read adapted and easy texts, but the tasks were very, very difficult. Nowadays, vice versa. So there's a shift to as authentic texts as possible. However, the tasks should not be very difficult. Yeah, they must be authentic real life. However, it doesn't mean that you can use novels in original with beginner level students. It doesn't mean, of course, you should use adapted text in the very beginning, but as their level goes up, we can slowly shift to more advanced or let's say authentic text. Yeah, authentic texts are not necessarily that difficult. You can find authentic, but quite easy texts as well. All right, selecting texts. These are the tips on how we can select the texts. So first we must find a text which actually suits the learning outcomes of our course. So if you are teaching students for IELTS, then you should use texts which look similar to IELTS texts, right? So they should be, for example, academic. Length, again, it should be quite long. Again, it depends on the learning outcomes, but try to use longer texts. They shouldn't be very short with just one passage in the end. They're too short. This is absolutely unacceptable. And especially if you use a scanning technique, because students must in scanning students must read quickly. Right? They have to scan. They mustn't spend too much time on every detail, on understanding every single aspect of the text. They just must find specific information. This is why the text must be long enough, because we want our students to practice this skill. We want our students to learn the skill, especially in real life when they are going to read long articles. This is why don't use very short passages. Use long texts. Use long texts. And the question that you ask, the scanning question, should not be in the very beginning. It should be somewhere in the middle, or by the end of the text. Don't ask question which might be answered right away from the very beginning. The scanning question must be somewhere in the middle. The answer to a scanning question must be somewhere in the middle or after that. Okay. To obtain acceptable reliability in as many passages as possible. So IELTS does so. Yeah. IELTS, TOEFL, many international tests they do. They have 3 passages. Even, oh no, in the end they have only 1 passage. Sometimes they have 2. I'm not mistaken. But they're very short. They're not valid and reliable. Okay, 4th one. Yeah, if you want to use scanning, as I've mentioned, the text must be long enough, but it also must have a lot of discrete information. There must be a lot of numbers, a lot of people, a lot of details, that you can ask. So make sure that your text actually contains this kind of information. Selecting texts which are interesting could be helpful, useful, but it shouldn't be too interesting. If it is too interesting, students might be overwhelmed by it. I once remember when I was at school, I thought there were 7th graders, and somehow we talked about planets. The text was about planets, and I draw on the board our universe, and said that our universe is very tiny. Actually, there are billions of universes. Solar system. I first draw our solar system and said that it is in the Milky Way universe. And there are billions of universes, and one of the students, he just zoned off. He was so overwhelmed, how tiny we are. Just until at the end of the lesson, he was just sitting and thinking about it. He was detached from the lesson. That's why make sure that Well, it's quite difficult to predict, of course, but still. Try to avoid this kind of too interesting information. All right. 6.1, avoid texts made up of information, of general knowledge information. Yeah, we mentioned it before in our earlier lectures and seminars. We don't use the texts which are can be easily answered because of the general knowledge of the students. A friend of mine scored really well in IELTS because, in reading part especially, because he said that the topic that he read was exactly the same in one of the texts. It was a theory of broken windows. All right, very interesting theory. I think I've mentioned it. If you haven't read it, just Google it and read it in your free time. A theory of broken windows. 7th one. Yeah, this is very important. Don't choose texts which are too culturally laden. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand specific culture. Avoid using them. If you think that the text is still very interesting and useful, please, you can just drop the passage, which has this culturally laden information that is difficult to understand. Like 5 years ago, we had some authors from Britain who published their books. They gave us the same advice. They said that we should avoid this kind of information, especially if it's something new and shocking to students. If it impedes comprehension, well, you just can drop it. You can paraphrase or completely drop it, remove it from the text. You can remove the whole sentence or even the whole passage. It's totally fine. We do so. They said, even we do so. So don't worry about it. Okay, let's get to the techniques. So what techniques do we use? First, we use multiple choice method. Quite popular technique. The third one, true, false. Sometimes it's followed by doesn't say. True, false doesn't say, or not given. In IELTS, it's not given. In TOEFL, it doesn't say. This is quite challenging. A lot of students struggle with doesn't say. They don't see the difference between doesn't say and false. So if you use this technique, doesn't say, make sure that your students actually have practiced it before. You must teach them how to differentiate doesn't say from false. False is the information, it's the information, but it's incorrect information in the text. Doesn't say, it's totally not mentioned in the text. But still, some students struggle. They can't see the difference. The third technique is unique answer. That is just one word. For example, here, yeah, was the man responsible for the first steam railway. It's the surname of the man, I think, here. Another technique is short answer. Might be a phrase, or it might be a sentence. Yeah. Here we have an example. Fact or opinion. Yeah, here we have an example about fact or opinion. So we should write F for fact or O for opinion. Research says that a lot of students cannot differentiate between fact and opinion. This is why we test it. Next technique, identifying order of events, topics, or arguments. Well, we usually use it in practice exercises, yeah, in seminars, but we don't quite often use it in tests. I've never seen actually it in tests. Why? Because it has one very serious limitation. If students actually puts one element of the text out of the correct sequence, only one sentence, it affects the whole performance. All the other parts will be displaced, and the student will get 0 for all of them. This is why we usually avoid it. but we use it. We can use them in our seminars, for example. Yeah, during our classes, it's totally fine. But avoid them using in your exams, especially high-stake exams. Identifying reference. So what does the word "it" in line 25 mean? What does the word commemorate in line 15 mean? Guessing the meaning. Yeah, I've mentioned it just a second ago. And summary clause. Yeah. So a reading passage is summarized by not the student, but by the tester. And some words are left. Yeah? There are gaps. And students must read the text and read the summary and complete the summary, yeah, using the text. This is another technique. Procedures. Yeah. What should we do? Read the text carefully, specifying operations in mind. Yeah. So before thinking of the questions, yeah, you just must think about operations. You read the text completely, yeah, and you can, for example, you find an interesting fact. Oh, this fact is good for a scanning technique because it has some numbers, yeah, and there are a lot of numbers. So this number seems to be very interesting. So I use it for scanning. You can even write it here, scanning, and then you should continue. Oh, this question is good for, I don't know, for using reference. This word is very useful. A lot of students actually confuse it. I think I use it for guessing the meaning from the context, yeah, and so on. So you should take notes. Yeah? The second procedure. The third one as well, I've mentioned. Yeah. So the tasks, think of the tasks that your students should perform, and then you can start drafting. We can paragraph numbers, or even give numbers, like as I mentioned earlier, like 5, 10, 15, 20. And of course, all tests should be presented to our colleagues for moderation, correction. We should get feedback from our colleagues. Is the text appropriate enough? Are the questions clear enough? Do the questions actually align with learning outcomes? Yeah, this is very important. So we should start with the end in mind. We should start with the learning outcomes in every course. So does the text match the learning outcomes and activities, the assessments that I did during my classes, for example? Do the questions actually test reading comprehension, and so on? Practical advice on item writing. When asking questions, yeah, make sure that the questions come in correct order in the scanning text. If there are like several scanning questions. This is also true for speaking parts. I remember when I was listening, it was my master's tests. When we were applying for masters, we took our local test. It was in the university. It was practical English, and there was listening part. There were two variants, A and B. Unfortunately, I was in the B part. And they just mixed the places of the questions. They didn't ask us different questions. They asked us completely the same questions as in variant A, but they changed the order of questions. So they mixed them. It was quite very difficult to follow. And so we even missed some questions because of that. Because in all kinds of tests, right? In all kinds of tests, as a rule, questions come in correct order. Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, the better and B actually didn't. Some missing questions. No? Second and yeah, I will mention second one, general knowledge. Second and third, yeah, like logical one. Yeah. Inhaling smoke from other people's cigarettes can cause lung cancer. You don't have to read the text. Make the items independent from each other. So here we have 3 questions about soup, but don't ask 3 questions just about one item now. If the student didn't understand something about soup, yeah, with slivers, yeah, or slimmers, he can make mistakes in the second and the third question too. So don't ask several questions on the same specific aspect, unless it's very important, of course. Unless it's very important, I know if it's I make a biology course, for example, yeah, and we can ask a few questions about a particular topic. But here, yeah, try to avoid. Don't use this. Don't ask like several questions, which are interconnected with each other as well, about one specific thing. If you have a native speaker available, have your questions moderated, and a note on scoring. What should we penalize and what we should not? We should not penalize grammar, spelling, or pronunciation mistakes. Yeah. Because we're not testing them, we're testing reading comprehension, understanding, how well students understand the text. This is why don't penalize students for this. Yeah. This is not actually a productive skill. It's reading ability, reading comprehension. All right, and this is our seminar assignment this week. You don't have home assignment this week. We'll do it during our seminars. So please make sure that you attend them. All right, if you don't attend the seminar, you will lose those points. You'll get 0 for the assessment for this particular task. So I'll bring some texts. Every group will have a different text, and they will have to read it first, of course, yeah, and then they'll have to ask 6 questions, as shown here. So one item for scanning, then multiple choice, unique answer. True, false doesn't say. They must ask question on doesn't say. Identifying reference. It, yeah. So those are usual pronouns. It. What does it or she or he or they in line 35 mean, for example, yeah? And guessing the meaning from the context, guessing the meaning of the word in the context. And of course, you'll have to input keys. Students usually forget it, but this is very important. And we'll do it during seminar. You'll have restriction, and you must finish your task until the end of the seminar. So you have 2 hours to complete this work, and you won't have extra time. That's why make sure that you attend our seminars this week. Right? Do you have any questions?
Yes, teacher, may I ask? You said that it's not appropriate. I mean, we cannot use vocabulary-related questions in the reading comprehension. I mean, in testing reading, right?
We cannot ask what? Sorry.
We cannot ask for definitions of certain words, right?
Definitions. You can. Why?
Just you said that we test reading, we should not test vocabulary as well.
We should actually. You can.
Oh, okay. Then I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can even encourage it because guessing meaning from the context is an authentic skill and a skill that we really need in real life. Nobody stops and explains every word for us, especially if we are listening to an announcement or watching the news. Yeah. So we must be able to, or listening to a lecture, for example. Yeah. So we must be able to use the context to guess the meaning of unknown words. And this skill is encouraged. So we can and we should. This is why I included two questions. Yeah, like it's for reference, and 6. Question number 6. Students must guess the meaning of one word in the context. Any other questions?
Teacher, may I ask, should we work individually or in pairs or groups?
Individually.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Individually,
thank you.
and yeah, you'll do it during the seminar. Well, we've had a lot of group work assignments, and now we are moving to individual assignments. Why did I do so? Because you cannot use only group assignments in your course, otherwise there will be free riders who actually don't do the whole part, or they don't do anything, and they just join the group. And the other 2 students do all the job, and the other 2 or 1 just might do nothing. This is why should always have individual components in assessments. That's why I added it.
But teacher, I'm sorry. Will we be given text, right?
Sure.
On the seminar?
I will give you text, yeah. So you don't have to search anything. There will be one text, and I'll provide it. Don't worry. Okay, I'll stop recording.